the genre conventions that Metal Gear Solid go for, is just it broadly appeals to me. It's the kind of genre fiction that I'm into in the first place. You know.
Paramount says Japanese writing does tend to go for subtext rather often, I think. Would you agree with that?
I don't have a lot of experience with Japanese literature, but literally based on the 2 books of Haruki Murakami that I've read, I'd agree with that. But I'm not going to claim myself as enough of an expert of Japanese. Akira Kurosawa, who is the leading, the most preeminent figure in Japanese cinema. His films are all subtextual. In terms of what they're actually about, it's all subtext. There's not a lot, a lot of the political and historical themes that Kurosawa's work confronts are subtextual rather than contextual, I'd say. Zolani, go ahead. I know you're trying to get in a word in.
Well, I'm not really sure what I can. I'm not really trying to ignore. I'm actually kind of listening right now on the stuff that you're mostly saying here. I was just thinking because as a Japanese writing tends not to go for subtext rather often, and I'm just thinking about the use of camp to get those things across. What we tend to see, there's this pattern in games, right? Where and this is something because if you buy the Arcade Review issue number 2, which is coming out probably in a few weeks.
Cool.
I'm gonna announce that soon. I mean I can't plug because I need to it's coming out this month. I'm not sure the exact date because of things from other people and whatever. But
okay, but go ahead.
But the thing is that in the interview I talked to Amy Dentada, and I talked to her about one of her games, and that she made about this actually an abusive relationship, and she was talking about how there are people who played the game and they honestly just and they thought it was kind of fun. They thought, oh, this is a nice little thing. I guess it could have been a little something, and they just kind of off, and how these ideas just completely just flew over their heads, just completely just kind of went over. It's like you're telling you this MGS shit, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like you're telling me about this socialist commentary and the Metal Gear PS2 franchise. I'm like, well, but it's just this. I'm just thinking about how a lot of this stuff always tends to fly over a radar, and I'm not. It's just I get confused. I get confused of why that is, and I keep wondering of how that can not happen. It's just I feel like maybe if Metal Gear Solid wasn't going for camp so much, maybe it would be able to put those ideas more directly.
Well, let's put it this way.
About it,
I think it's just the nature of games in general. Even if you have a game that's very upfront about what it's about, 70 to 80% of people are just not gonna get. They're gonna dip out on it basically because it's They're there for the play and for the experience, but they don't think about the fact that part of the experience is in learning about those other things. So I feel like that's a big plus as to why you would want to play a game more than once, which is why it really bugs me when about this huge culture of games where you buy them or you rent them and then you play them once,
right?
And then you either return them or you just sell them. And it's just there's a lot of really good games that require multiple playthroughs to really get. Just like
Zolani.
There are a lot of movies, a lot of albums, a lot of TV shows, a lot of comics, a lot of animations, or anything in general that you have to experience more than once just to really absorb the content. Especially when it comes to games, because games have so much shit to offer you at one moment. Every single second that passes is 8 different things going on at once. You have the music, you have the graphics, or anything else like that. But then you also have the element of play, or whether or not you're actually playing, and how you're playing, and how you have to approach every situation while you're playing, and all of this feeds into that experience. But because of the way that games are, that experience is rarely the same every single time. Rarely, you have a game where it's okay, I'm gonna play this a certain way and go through this a certain way, and even if you follow the same patterns that you did before, it's still not gonna be the exact same experience because it's not the same every time you play it, except for story events and stuff. But a lot of that stuff is really I feel a lot of that is because of how much play can be done in a game at any single time. It's kind of how do I process everything else that's happening right now?
You know what? I do think that a lot of that lies in the culture around consuming games. We consume games as these sort of like entertainment machines that just need to like give us feedback loops every once in a while. We don't consume them as things that have actual content to them. And with this is understanding of a culture that seems games primarily as just story entertainment. It's something that you play, you get your fun out, and you just kind of throw them away. That they don't really have any real value to engage with on a different kind of level. So the thing is just that's just like a lot of just how people tend to engage with games in general, which is not in a way that's very useful and productive any more than just kind of me getting my fun factor out of it.
Right,
Yeah.
Zolani.
Yeah.
Let me say this.
Yep.
You kind of, I mean, for the longest time, I experienced the Metal Gear series simply as like these cool action games that were different because they were about sneaking and also weren't entirely about killing. And I just kind of experienced them also as like these, they also had cool stories that also had this subtext of being anti-nuke. Like, because literally all of the games are about preventing nuclear, or, for, like, MGS 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all about preventing nuclear attacks. So, I mean, it's like, so speaking in the, like, so, like, you can see it in the broadest possible terms of just, like, okay, like, this is a fun game with a cool story, and, like, you enjoy playing it. It took me... I didn't even realize all of the things that MGS2 was about until I decided to start reading about it to try and justify like my love of the game, because I liked it for a long time before I would claim to understand it. Like I was playing MGS2 for like 7 or 8 years before I ever read James Clinton Howell's definitive essay on it. And and then just kind of started to understand both the game through that lens and the entire series through that lens. And that's true of almost any given video game. And I think like this actually is a lot of what my of what my criticism is about. Is like, for example, this piece I just put up, which I've been parroting to a bunch of people. It's about the Black Waltzes in Final Fantasy IX. And I had just replayed it, and I just realized, oh wow, there's lights of like visual allusion to like a lot of the stuff that the game becomes about in this experience, in these encounters, and I just realized it now. Basically, I'm just reflecting what TJ said, which is that you need time with games to understand what they're about. And I mean, granted, it's just we have a culture that doesn't really promote us, being focused on older games, or rather spending long periods of time with single works because we want novelty or currency or whatever the term might be.
And even as critics, like in terms of like there aren't really a lot of structures that allow us to even spend time with them. We're just trying to rush, or we're trying to get content out and web content and all that bullshit.
Right.
Getting clicks on all that crap is just like
and so
really got the opportunity to.
And so I've just kind of, that kind of relates to, I've been kind of relating my mission, like I say it by mission, but I mean, honestly, it's pretty sincere, is like, that's a lot of what I've decided to make my games criticism about, and I didn't necessarily know I was going there when I started, was that I think a lot of, especially these older games that we regard as classics, are kind of like under-interpreted. Like under-analyzed, like I think, well, actually, Ocarina of Time actually has been pretty well analyzed as like, kind of being about how, like you get older and people die and that sort of thing. Like, and it kind of paints in broad strokes, but that's like, people have come to understand it. But like, I only started seeing a lot of that stuff a few years ago. And the thing about it is just like it takes time for us to realize what these games are all about. And so the thing is, I just kind of decided to revisit a lot of old games and see what I can get out of them, because it just feels like some of these games that either one were really popular but also kind of under discussed, quote unquote. So we have these games that like we really love but we don't understand. Or we have games where like they just kind of went unnoticed because we couldn't understand them because they kind of demand more analysis up front. Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter being a prime example of this.
What is a prime example?
Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter.
Okay.
And that's the other thing is actually when Zoya posted that basically translation of the Japanese game criticism that I don't know.
Yeah, he. He's a dude, yeah.
Okay, when Zoya posted that stuff that he'd read, of the Japanese game criticism, it was about a game I never heard about, which was really exciting, and it was also a perspective that I kind of thought I would end up seeing out of Japanese criticism, which is that they're a lot more accepting of linear games that don't allow much choice. You know, and it's just like, that was really fucking exciting to me. I guess my point there being that a lot of these old games are Japanese games because the Japanese dominated the industry for so long, and we don't have a lot of Japanese language perspective on that, at least here in the West. There's not been a lot of broad effort to reach out to Japanese language game critics in the West, and I don't think there's been a lot of effort to translate their work either.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No. It's such a wall.
And I know it's the language barrier, but I mean, like, if we think about it, like, for example, like, a phrase that I use a lot is "death of the author," and that's a French phrase, and you know, Sartre is a French philosopher, and like, his works have been translated, you know, like.
Well, the thing is, it takes very specific important people to do that. Like I know that Marx's Capital wasn't translated for a long time. It wasn't translated for decades, and then when it was finally translated to English, it made huge waves in the West, but that wasn't for a long time. So it really takes certain kinds of people who are willing to do that. And it doesn't seem like anyone is really willing to translate those kinds of things because there isn't a lot of investment in games criticism in general. You know,
yeah.
This is kind of an aside, since you know the topic is kind of different. But I feel like that's an issue that the games community has in general, and I feel like a lot of why it's been making so many big like motions lately in terms of like, you know, making sure shit happens and shit actually gets done is because more and more people have been like stepping up to the plate and going, hey, you guys, we kind of need to give a shit about this thing because it's, you know, it's part of our culture, it's part of our community,
right?
And it's like, it's important, and if we want it to get better, these are the kind of things that we need to start doing, whether or not we want to, because it's just one of those things where it's like nobody has an obligation to like participate in any of it, but like but doing it makes such a difference in the long run with like everybody that's involved. So like for me personally, like, even though it's a ton of energy to like talk about shit that's going wrong in games and try to come up with ways to fix it without people like, you know, trying to shut me up every single time, it's a lot of fucking work and it requires a huge amount of energy. And the fact that like people like can't do it every single day, like whether or not I include myself, is like amazing because it's like ridiculous. It's like an incredibly daunting task, especially if you're doing it by yourself. So like a lot of times people are just completely afraid to make that jump because they already know that it's gonna be tough.
So yeah, geez. I mean, it's almost 3:26. I mean, is there anything